everyone. Welcome to the next podcast. We thank you for joining us. This is the Nakinoku Startup Life podcast, and today I'm with Earl. If James Brown was the hardest working man in show business, Earl is the hardest working man I know in packaged food. He has a daytime. He's a day job. He does a lot of farmers markets selling barbecue on the weekends. And on top of all of that, he's got a barbecue sauce brand, which is known as Uncle Earl's, which, as we'll find out, is actually a reference to his father. Earl, thank you for joining us today. It's awesome to have you on the podcast, man.
I appreciate it. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. And we've been at a event before, and it always struck me not just how hardworking you are. When I talked to my wife about meeting you, I was like, this man's a machine. Just keeps working, man. Like, I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you keep it up, but yeah, you're an inspiration, man. I appreciate working with you, and I appreciate both you, Udell, and Elise, all kind of trusting me back when I was completely unproven and kind of promised something that we weren't exactly sure how it was all going to work out, but grateful that it all did work out. But yeah, let's get into it. So today we kind of wanted to talk about legacy, but before we do, I just wanted to talk a little bit about barbecue because I love barbecue as well.
Yeah.
It's a passion of mine. And on one of your Instagram posts, you're talking about low and slow, and I'm all about that.
Right.
You talk about barbecue, you can have ribs if you make it hot and fast, which is at a high temperature for a short period of time.
Right.
It just doesn't break down the meat as well as when you
Right,
do low and slow.
Rendering the fat and everything.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So maybe talk a little bit about what do you like about barbecue? What is it about barbecue? And maybe tell us a little bit about the brand and where you're available today.
Okay. Well, the brand is Uncle Earl's Barbecue and Blue Sauce. And the reason I called it that is because, well, for one, I named it after my father. Everyone calls my father like Uncle Earl. No one calls me Uncle Earl in the family, And so he's the one that taught me about barbecue. He's the one that taught me about the blues. And the funny thing about it, you kind of take things for granted. Every time we would barbecue or have the family come over and whatever, the blues is playing in the background. My father's from Belzona, Mississippi. So that was like the sound, that he grew up with and that I grew up with, and it's, once again, it's something that you take for granted. You don't really think about. And it's like, I just wanted to give people that vibe that I had, that myself and my family had growing up in terms of the music, the camaraderie, the whole thing. To me, that's what a good barbecue is. Mm. It's not just sitting by yourself, even though it's still good. But, it's about just like family and coming together. And so I'm sorry, what was the question?
No, just tell us a little bit about like your brand and also how where you're sold, how you got into barbecue itself.
So once again, my father, one day he had to go pick up my mother. I don't remember how old I was, maybe 10. I don't remember. I was young. He had to go pick up my mother, and he left me with the grill like, okay, that chicken's on, take it off. I got to go pick up your mother. And I was like, oh, okay, And so, believe me, I was so nervous, and I'm watching this chicken, and I'm doing what I can do. I'm trying to emulate what he did. And so I took the chicken off, and when he came home, he tasted it. And, my father's from the South, and he's country is I don't know what. And because this was my first time hearing this term. And he was like, boy, you put your foot in this. And I was like, oh. Like I messed up. And he was like, oh no, this is good. I was like, oh, okay. I had no idea at that time what that meant. And I was hooked. I was hooked in terms of cooking food, someone tasted it and enjoying what you do. And then also I was a picky eater as a kid. My mother's as well is from the same town that my father's from in Mississippi. So we would get a lot of Southern food that I didn't eat. I'm kind of weird. I don't eat greens, but I'll eat spinach and cabbage.
Okay.
So, and I can only, to a certain degree, cook what I eat. I've worked in other restaurants, and I can follow the recipe, but it's something about you knowing how you want this to taste, and making it to your taste, and then serving it to somebody else. They're like, oh my God, this is good. I never had it like this. That's because you made it, to your taste, and they enjoy what you make, and that's what I really love about barbecue, and then once again with my sauce, because this is something that I made for myself and made for my family, and that we were eating, and how it actually got started. I'm a filmmaker, and we were at the house. We were shooting a movie, a short, and I wanted to feed the crew, my friends who came over to help me shoot this movie. So I made some jerk chicken, and with barbecue sauce. And so at this time there was no jerk barbecue sauce, right? And so my friends they were like, "Oh my God, this is good, man. You could sell this." And I'm, ha ha. And I really didn't pay any attention to it. My whole thing was just trying to make a good barbecue sauce and make it consistent every time. And I didn't want to stick to that recipe because I was using kind of doctoring up products that was already out. Right. My thing, I wanted to do something from scratch. So I just kept working with it, trying different things and making different things. And I finally made my own jerk barbecue from scratch, which is the Southside Jerk Barbecue. Gotcha. And my family loved it. This is something that we did. They were like, "Hey, make that barbecue sauce," And then my cousin Erica, she went to this church in Bronzeville. I'm blanking on the name of the church. And they had a family and friend celebration, whatever, and they had a barbecue competition. And she said, "Hey, you should get in it." I was like, okay. So I went in, and I thought I was going to lose because I was like, okay, the fix is in. Yeah. So the guy who was running the competition was in the competition. Nice. I'm like, come on, man. For real? Come on, son. So, and then he had Sweet Baby Ray's. Oh, wow. And I'm like, and at this time, Sweet Baby was relatively new, but everybody loves Sweet Baby Ray's. I use Sweet Baby Ray's, and I was like, man. And he was saying, well, it's not like Sweet Baby's because I doctor it. I made it better. So, but I actually used my jerk barbecue sauce, and I won.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I was supposed to go on stage and say, hey, this is, at the time it wasn't called Uncle Earl's. At the time I was Jamaican Jacks is what I called it. Jamaican Jacks. And he was mad that I beat him. And he wouldn't let me go up on stage to get the check and the certificate. They mailed it to me later. It was funny. Oh, wow. Yeah, so there was no promotion from that. He was mad. So the Southside Jerk is an award-winning sauce.
Nice. Very nice. No, it's it's interesting the way you talk about that. I just watched a video, and I actually put it on Twitter, about Ira Glass, who does This American Life on NPR. He was talking about the creative process. And, it's really interesting whether you're making food, whether you're starting a business, this creative process of we want to make something and put it out into the world. Right? That's really cool. Right. I think that's what drives a lot of us is that look, there's something that we've experienced and we want to share that with the world. It's like that, that creative process. So, that's an awesome story for sure. And I think that leads us to what we wanted to talk about today, which is, the kind of the legacies that we take on board, the teaching from your dad, and how do we leave that for the next generation, right? So when you think about what your dad left for you as a legacy, it's obviously not just barbecue sauce, right? Our parents leave us much more than that. Anything that you'd want to say, in terms of what you learned from your dad, something that you took away that kind of helped you in the business that you think would help other people as well?
Well, it's funny. My father really gave me, he didn't give me a blueprint in terms of exactly how to do barbecue or exactly how to do things. But one thing he did get into me is you start it, you got to finish it. And he kind of encouraged me to be me and do my thing and what it was that I was doing. I'm sure your family's the same way. Everybody's like I said, it's the art of creating that people love. And it's to be able to say, hey, I did this, this is me. So someone, your auntie or your mother or your uncle will have a recipe and they're famous for these chicken cutlets or for this, and they're not sharing that recipe this is mine. I created this with my hand. And so my father kind of instilled that into me to create something and make it taste unique to you that is good, because I used to always cook something and he'll taste it and I'm watching him like, is he gonna like it? Is this, so that's something that he really put into me to, to take your time with it, because like you can't rush barbecue, you have some, like, it's funny, my uncle, he teases me to this day about cooking, taking so long to cook ribs. It don't take that long to cook ribs, and he'll, burn it, not burn it, but he'll, turn the grill up and he'll go fast and he'll put aluminum foil over the ribs, somehow how the steam's going to come back down and cook it. That's his way of doing it. And his ribs aren't bad, but they're not as tender as mine. But everybody had their way of doing things, and that's something that my father showed me. Like, okay, look, take your time with it.
Yeah.
Do your thing. And that's what's important. I know that may sound a little vague, but it's important to do your thing and make it yours. Because once you have that, and once you master it, if there's even a such thing of doing it, because you're always learning, as you go. Once you have that, that's the key. That's it. No one can take that from you, because we were just talking actually last night. It's my sergeant. He cooks as well. And I was talking to him about like, what is Chicago barbecue? What is Chicago barbecue? Because the world is much smaller now.
Yeah.
And when I was a kid, in my mind, Chicago barbecue was a thing, right? And the funny thing of Chicago has always been known as a foodie spot. Even before that word was created, it was known as a place to come and get food. And living in Chicago, growing up in Chicago, you take things for granted because people come here for a Chicago-style hot dog, but to you and I, it's a hot dog.
Right.
It's like, oh, they got the relish and they got the sport peppers. You're looking like it's a hot dog, right? But they don't eat it like that where they're from, and you don't really think like that. And we were talking about like, what is Chicago-style barbecue? And the thing we came up with was like, rib tips. They don't really do rib tips outside of Chicago. It's not a big thing like it is in Chicago. Like, you can go to other places, of course they do rib tips, but it's a different thing here in Chicago. Like, that's our thing. And it comes from, being poor and not throwing anything away. You coming from the South. In the South, they ate everything. They made anything a delicacy. And so when you're doing your St. Louis cut of ribs, you cut the rib tip off and you throw it away. But if you're working at the meat factory and you cut the ribs and you got to feed your family, hey, don't throw that away. We're going to do something with this, And I love rib tips. And it's like I know somebody probably hear this and get mad, like, oh, we do it in our city, in our town. Like, yeah, okay, yeah, but that's really a Chicago thing.
It's a thing, right.
Yeah, and I know on the South Side, it's funny because as I'm trying to figure out what's a Chicago thing, what's really my thing, people will tell you what they want. On 95th, the Beverly market, 95th is one of the markets that I work. On Sundays, I had chicken. I started like with chicken, and I started out with just doing ribs. And the people, hey, what are the tips and the links? Which is like peanut butter and jelly on the South Side. It's like you got tips, you got links. It's not even a rarity. People don't do tips without links. You probably could buy a link sandwich or whatever, what have you, but if you got tips, you got links.
Right.
And so I have people like, yo, where it's at, And it's funny, like, okay, Chicago barbecue got to be more than that, But as I was saying, in terms of the world being smaller, briskets are out of Texas now. Everybody's doing, they might do a Texas-style brisket, or they might put their own little spin depending where they are. Yeah. But you have more people doing brisket now, and pulled pork, and, burnt ends. It's out of Kansas City. It's in Chicago. It's in Oakland. So it's a little harder to define to a certain degree now because the world is smaller. But that goes right back to like what my father said. You take your time and do your thing. And it'll shine. It'll rise to the top.
Yeah, and I think, even though we want to talk about legacy, but I think this is really something that's on my heart too, which is, taking your time about things. Because, I'm hitting that, like, what is it, like 16 months, I think, in business. And it's one of the hardest things because oftentimes that's a time at which things start to slow down. You hit a wall, right? Yeah. People talk about that second year of marriage. It's like that same thing. You hit a wall And either you get to choose to keep going, right? You have a conviction, you believe in the business, and you keep going, or you give up and you walk away. And there's really only two choices there. You can't like drag yourself along. You kind of have to decide either I'm going to do this or I'm going to walk away. Yeah, that whole concept of keeping at it and until you perfect it.
Yeah.
You know, that takes time. That takes a lot of patience. But the other thing I also wanted to point out, like the nugget of truth in what you said, which is a lot of the stuff that is fashionable now started from people who were poor trying to make things. So, you know, like you talk, you know, for us Indians, curry, right? Curry comes out of trying to preserve meat.
Right.
You're trying to preserve meat with spices. And now it's this fancy thing, but it started out as poor people trying to, you know, it's so funny. You look across so many different cultures, it's the same. Sushi, right? Sushi was originally made as these quick things that someone could take with them and eat on the run, right? Like it was like, right. But now it's this like high class thing. The same thing with brisket. You know, for a long time, nobody really cared much about brisket.
Right.
And then suddenly it's this thing and it's this high class and everybody's paying so much money for it. But it was really a way to take really tough meat, make it tender and make it tasty so that, you know, people who were poor could still enjoy it.
And to that degree, the same thing with burn ends. You know, burn ends was something that you would cut. They used to give burn ends away. You know, they used to give it away because this is the end of the, you know, on the brisket. They're trying to get to the meat of the brisket and like, oh yeah, we're gonna get rid of these burn ends. And they would just cut it and just have it on the side for people in line to taste like, okay. But then people kept coming to ask for it, and he's like, wait a minute. You know, so this is a thing, right? And so they start selling burn ends, and like I said, this is a thing in Kansas City, and because we know that, like, you know, that brisket is a Texas thing, but once again, it grew out of Texas and went to Kansas City, and then Kansas City had burn ends, and now burn ends are elsewhere. But like you said, that's, you know, poor people. I'm quoting Bugs Bunny, so forgive me, but necessity is the mother of invention. And it truly is. When you, like you said, the same thing with the sushi, the same thing with the curry, jerk chicken. You know, that was made by the Maroons, who, like, slaves that ran away in the Blue Mountains in Jamaica, and it's like, okay, we got to eat, and we don't need to have a lot of smoke in the air. They're like, this is where we at, come and get us. So, you know, they developed a way to cook without the smoke being all over the place. When they was cooking low and slow and they were making their jerk chicken, and they weren't thinking in terms of like, yeah, we're going to cook this and this is going to be called jerk chicken. No, they was feeding themselves, feeding their families. When you see something on TV, they want it to be shiny, they want it to be glitzy. So when they're talking about brisket, they're not really going to have a conversation about where the brisket came from. And in some instances, they do. But when you actually listen to like Aaron Franklin or whoever, he's talking about how he started. He talk about, give you a little history on the brisket, why I cut it this way, why I trim it this way. You know, and those are the nuggets that I think people will gloss over it. But this is Aaron, you know what I'm saying? He's telling you, he's like the griot, you know, and just handing this knowledge down. Listen to what I'm saying. This is why I do this. And then even when you get it, you know, remember what Aaron said, but once again, you're going to make it your own. It's a certain way why you trim it, why you do it the way you do it. You know, but I think people who love, like you were saying in terms of like you like barbecue and you like ribs or whatever, what have you, but you're not really into the fast way of doing it. You like the whole process, the artistry of making it slow and having it be tender and taste a certain way. You know, and it's a lot of people like that. It's a lot of people like that. And of course you have your commercial barbecue places out here, and you can go and get your ribs and whatever you want to get. But I think if you had the opportunity to go to this shiny place or this place with this old man, you're looking at the old man like, okay, yeah, he got regular slice of white bread. You know, I think I'm gonna go over here with him. Because he was here all night. This guy just got here and like, I'm ready. No,
that's a great, because we're coming to the end of our time, but I feel like, you know, someone was talking about call to action, and typically they talk about call to action of a podcast. It's like, well, subscribe and blah, blah. But I think there's something deeper than that. When we talk, like, you know, person to person, some of it's about like learning from each other. And hopefully people who are listening will take away from this about being more thoughtful about food. You know, one, be more thoughtful about food. And try and uplift and support those who are taking time with their craft, right? Not just the fancy schmancy, and it's not for rich or anything, but just try and find those people who've been at it for a while and reward them for that by supporting
Right.
them for sure. The other thing to the entrepreneurs who are listening, I think from taking the point from what you were saying is take your time, right?
Right.
Anything that's worth doing is going to take some time. It's worth spending that time, investing that time into it.
You have to fail up though.
Right.
That's something that you there's no way to get to a good brisket without making a bad brisket.
Yeah.
You're not going to get to a good painting without making a bad painting. The funny thing about it, like if you look at Picasso, he knows how to paint traditionally. He can make a life painting,
Right.
but this is his style. And before he got to his style, he had to make bad paintings, even if you think Picasso paintings are bad. But he had to learn by making mistakes and someone saying, okay, don't do that. Then he learned something himself, like, oh, okay, I'm not going to do that anymore. So you have to fail up. You have to make your mistakes. I know I definitely failed up going into the winter and, trying to have a barbecue sauce company in a pandemic where people don't want to come together. My whole thing is, hey, come together, listen to some music, get some food. They're like, yeah, no, don't breathe on me.
That is very true. But you know what, man? I am so encouraged by the fact that we are coming to the summer, just at the
Yes.
beginning of the summer, right? And people are finally getting out. I'm hearing people talk about barbecue again. So
Yes, I'm excited.
if I'm looking forward to it, and hopefully we'll start to see some of the folks who've been working with us and others
Yeah.
in the local community start to be able to get more business and get out there, because I know there's really good barbecue out there, and you do awesome barbecue, and I appreciate you and your outlook on life, man. Like when we were out at the 1871 event, you connect with people, and I appreciate that. I think a lot of times we just look for the sale. I'm really bad about that. I'm an introvert, so I'm not really good at connecting with people. And I appreciate that you look at people and talk to them, and that's a big deal. So
Yeah.
thanks for joining us today, man. I really appreciate it. And I said this to Olivia on our last podcast, but it's true. I feel like there's so much more to talk about.
Yeah,
So-
I feel like I didn't.
It's all good, man.
I hope I got the point you needed me to get.
We did. It's just it's great to talk, and let's talk again soon. I appreciate
Definitely.
you, and let's maybe plan another catch up soon.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Well, thank you for joining us on our third podcast now. We're hopefully getting better with this, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you.